Sometimes, the most ordinary moments become the most extraordinary turning points in our lives. Michael Chen never expected that accepting one final Uber ride on a cold Tuesday night would unravel everything he thought he knew about himself, his passengers, and the thin line between desperation and hope. What started as a simple pickup at St. Mary's Hospital would become a journey that challenged every assumption about good and evil, victim and perpetrator, and the lengths people will go to save the ones they love. This is the story of three strangers whose lives collided in the most unexpected way, forever changing their destinies.
Quick pause. Before we continue, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. The notification chimed on Michael Chen's phone at 11:47 p.m., cutting through the silence of his 2015 Toyota Camry. Another ride request. He stared at the glowing screen, watching the small dot representing a potential passenger waiting at St. Mary's Hospital. His finger hovered over the accept button as exhaustion weighed down his shoulders like a heavy coat he couldn't remove. 45 years old, and this was what his life had become. Michael rubbed his tired eyes, catching his reflection in the rearview mirror. Gray streaks had appeared in his black hair seemingly overnight, and the lines around his eyes told a story of 2 years spent driving strangers around the city, trying to make ends meet after losing his software engineering job. The foreclosure notice crumpled in his glove compartment served as a constant reminder of his failures. 3 months behind on mortgage payments, with his 16-year-old daughter Sarah counting on him to keep their home, the same home where her mother had read her bedtime stories, where family dinners once filled the kitchen with laughter, where normal life had existed before everything fell apart. Michael accepted the ride. St. Mary's Hospital loomed against the night sky like a fortress of fluorescent lights and human suffering. He'd picked up passengers here countless times, worried family members, exhausted medical staff, people carrying the weight of life and death decisions. Tonight felt different, though. He couldn't pinpoint why. Maybe it was the way the shadows seemed deeper, or how the usual bustle of emergency room activity appeared unusually quiet. Elena Rodriguez emerged from the hospital's automatic doors at exactly midnight, moving with the careful precision of someone carrying a large canvas bag against her chest, like it contained everything that mattered in the world. She was smaller than he'd expected, maybe 5'4", with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that had seen better days. Her blue scrubs marked her as hospital staff, probably a nurse finishing a long shift. But it was her eyes that caught Michael's attention when she slid into the back seat. They held the kind of desperate determination he recognized from his own mirror. The address she provided was in downtown Phoenix, a 20-minute drive through mostly empty streets. Elena settled into the seat, placing the bag beside her with extraordinary care. She avoided eye contact, instead staring out the window at the passing streetlights, as if each one held answers to questions she was afraid to ask. Michael had learned to read his passengers over the years. The talkers wanted distraction from their problems. The silent ones were usually processing something heavy. Elena fell into the latter category, but with an intensity that made him want to bridge the gap between driver and passenger, if only to offer some small comfort. "Long shift?" he asked gently, adjusting the rearview mirror to catch a response. "You could say that." Elena's voice carried the hoarse quality of someone who had been holding back tears. She shifted slightly, her hand moving protectively over the bag. "Sorry, I'm not great company tonight." "No worries. Sometimes quiet is exactly what people need." They drove in comfortable silence for several minutes, the city's night rhythm providing a soundtrack of distant sirens and late-night traffic. Michael found himself genuinely curious about Elena's story, though he respected her obvious need for privacy. In his experience, people shared what they needed to share when they were ready. The GPS indicated they were about halfway to their destination when Elena suddenly spoke again. "Do you have kids?" The question caught him by surprise. "A daughter, 16. "I have a son. He's 8. Elena's voice softened, and Michael could see a reflection in the window, a small smile touching her lips. His name is Diego. He's everything to me. There was something in the way she said it that made Michael's chest tighten. Not just maternal love, but the kind of fierce protectiveness that came with facing a threat to your child's well-being. He had felt it himself during Sarah's worst asthma attacks, when her breathing became labored and he driven through red lights to reach the hospital. "8's a great age," Michael offered. "Still thinks you're the smartest person in the world." "Diego thinks I can fix anything." Elena's laugh held no humor. If only that were true. They were entering downtown now, passing between buildings that stretched toward the sky like concrete fingers. The address Elena had given was just a few blocks ahead, in a part of town that transitioned from business district to residential without much warning. Michael slowed the car, checking the GPS again. "Actually," Elena said suddenly, "could you pull over for just a minute? I need to make a call before we get there." Michael obliged, steering the Camry into a well-lit parking spot near a 24-hour diner. Elena fumbled with her phone, her hands shaking slightly. Whatever calls she needed to make, it wasn't going to be easy. "Take your time," Michael said, though something in his gut told him this stop wasn't really about a phone call. Elena dialed the number and waited. When someone answered, her entire demeanor changed. The careful composure she'd maintained since getting in the car cracked, revealing raw emotion underneath. "Mrs. Patterson, it's Elena Rodriguez. I know it's late, but I have the money, all of it." Her voice broke on the last words. "Can we meet tomorrow morning to finalize everything? I can't wait any longer." Michael tried not to listen, but the confined space of the car made privacy impossible. Elena was talking about money, a substantial amount from the sound of it. Medical bills, most likely. He'd heard similar conversations from other hospital employees who had ridden in his car. Healthcare workers dealing with their own healthcare crisis. The irony lost on no one. When Elena ended the call, she sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the bag beside her. Michael waited, sensing she needed to process whatever had just transpired. "I'm sorry. I know this is probably weird for you." "Not weird at all. We've all got stuff we're dealing with." Elena looked up, meeting his eyes in the rearview mirror for the first time. "Diego needs surgery, heart surgery. The insurance won't cover the full cost, and I've been trying to raise the money for months." The weight in her voice told Michael everything he needed to know about those months. The extra shifts, the borrowed money, the sleepless nights calculating and recalculating expenses. He'd been there himself, watching every penny disappear into the black hole of necessity. "That's a lot to carry," he said simply.
3 months ago, they told me we had time, that his condition was manageable. Last week, that changed. Elena's hand moved to the bag again. Now they're saying we need to act within days, not weeks. Michael felt a familiar surge of helpless anger, not at Elena, but at the system that forced parents to choose between financial ruin and their children's lives. He'd been lucky with Sarah's health issues. Asthma was manageable with medication and careful monitoring, but he'd met other parents at the hospital, seen the desperate calculations in their eyes as they weighed treatment options against mortgage payments. "You found a way to make it work," he said, nodding toward the bag. "I found a way, yes." Elena's tone carried an odd note, something that made Michael look more closely at her reflection in the window. Sometimes you do things you never thought you'd do when your child's life is on the line. Before Michael could respond, his phone buzzed with another ride request. He glanced at the screen, then back at Elena. "Ready to continue, or do you need more time?" "No, we should go. The person I'm meeting will be waiting." Michael pulled back into traffic, but something had shifted in the car's atmosphere. Elena's earlier vulnerability had been replaced by a tension that made the air feel thick. She kept checking her watch, then the bag, then her phone, in a repetitive cycle that suggested barely controlled anxiety. The final address was only 6 blocks away now, in a residential area where modest houses sat behind small yards and chain-link fences.
It was the kind of neighborhood where people knew their neighbors' names and kids rode bikes in the street during summer evenings. A place where Elena's late-night visit would definitely be noticed. "Here is fine," Elena said, when they were still 2 blocks from the specified address. "I'll walk from here." Michael pulled over, confused by the change in plans, but not wanting to pry. Elena gathered her bag, then paused before opening the door. She turned back to look at him directly, and Michael was struck by the intensity in her eyes. "Thank you," she said, "for listening, for not asking too many questions." "Good luck with your son's surgery." Elena's smile was sad and grateful and somehow resigned all at once. "Diego is going to be fine. Whatever it takes, he's going to be fine." She stepped out of the car and began walking toward the residential street, the bag still clutched tightly against her chest. Michael watched her go, noting how she moved with purpose despite the late hour and unfamiliar neighborhood. Whatever meeting awaited her, she was committed to seeing it through. He was about to drive away when something made him hesitate. Maybe it was his protective instincts, honed by years of worrying about Sarah. Maybe it was the odd way Elena had ended their conversation, as if she were saying goodbye to more than just an Uber driver. Or maybe it was the simple recognition of one struggling parent trying to help another parent navigate an impossible situation. Michael turned off the engine and settled back to wait. If Elena was meeting someone in this quiet neighborhood at past midnight, carrying what appeared to be a substantial amount of money, then perhaps having a witness nearby wasn't such a bad idea. He'd give her 15 minutes just to make sure everything went smoothly, then head home to check on Sarah and prepare for another day of juggling part-time jobs and mounting bills. He had no way of knowing that those 15 minutes would unravel everything he thought he understood about the night, about Elena, and about the true nature of the desperate choices people make when everything they love hangs in the balance.
Michael had been parked for exactly 8 minutes when he saw the figure emerge from between 2 houses. At first, it was just movement in his peripheral vision, a shadow separating itself from the larger darkness between streetlights. But as the figure moved closer to the street where Elena had disappeared, Michael's attention sharpened. The man was young, maybe late 20s, wearing a dark hoodie that obscured his face. He moved with the careful deliberation of someone who didn't want to be seen, staying close to fences and parked cars. Michael's grip on the steering wheel tightened as he watched the figure pause at the corner, then turn in the direction Elena had gone. Every instinct told Michael to start the engine and drive away. This wasn't his problem. Elena was a grown woman who had made her own choices about meeting someone in this neighborhood. He had enough problems of his own without getting involved in whatever was about to unfold. But he couldn't shake the image of Elena's face when she'd talked about her son, the desperate love, the fierce determination, the willingness to do whatever it took. It was exactly how he'd felt when Sarah had her worst asthma attack 2 years ago, when the doctors had suggested a specialist consultation they couldn't afford. Michael grabbed his phone and quietly opened his door. If something was wrong, he'd call 911. If everything was fine, he'd leave quietly, and Elena would never know he'd been there. Either way, he'd be held asleep knowing he'd done the right thing. He followed the sidewalk at a distance, staying in the shadows cast by parked cars and overgrown hedges. The residential street was quiet except for the occasional sound of a television or air conditioning humming behind closed windows. Normal family sounds from normal homes, completely unaware of the drama playing out on their street. Elena had stopped in front of a small ranch-style house with a front porch and a yard that needed attention. Michael could see her silhouette near the front steps, the bag still in her arms. She appeared to be waiting, checking her phone repeatedly. The hooded figure had stopped too, positioned behind a large SUV parked about 3 houses down. Michael realized with growing unease that the man wasn't heading toward Elena's location. He was positioning himself to intercept her when she left. Michael's mind raced through possibilities. Maybe the man was Elena's contact, arriving separately for security reasons. Maybe he was an unrelated resident, stepping out to walk his dog or grab something from his car. Maybe Michael's protective instincts were seeing threats that didn't exist. Then Elena's phone rang loud enough to carry in the still night air.
Michael watched her answer, saw her body language change from waiting to animated conversation. After about 2 minutes, she hung up and began walking back toward the street, moving more quickly than she had before. The hooded figure emerged from his hiding spot. Michael's heart rate spiked as he watched the man intercept Elena's path. Even from his distance, he could see Elena's shock and fear as the stranger approached her. The man gestured toward her bag, and Elena took several steps backward. This was really happening. Michael fumbled for his phone to call 911, but before he could dial, the situation escalated. The man grabbed for Elena's bag and she pulled back, stumbling and nearly falling. The bag slipped from her grip, spilling some of its contents onto the sidewalk. Michael didn't remember making the conscious decision to intervene. He found himself running toward them, his phone's flashlight cutting through the darkness as he shouted, "Hey, leave her alone!" Both Elena and the would-be thief looked up in surprise. In the harsh light of Michael's phone, he could see the man's face clearly for the first time. He was younger than Michael had initially thought, maybe late 20s, with the kind of thin and desperate look that came from too much stress and not enough sleep. His eyes darted between Michael and Elena, calculating odds and escape routes. "Just walk away, man. This doesn't concern you." "Like hell it doesn't." Michael kept his phone light trained on the man's face while positioning himself between the thief and Elena. "Elena, are you okay?" "I'm fine," but her voice shook as she knelt to gather the scattered contents of her bag. In the flashlight's glow, Michael caught a glimpse of what had spilled. Stacks of cash, more money than he'd seen in one place in years. The sight of so much cash seemed to galvanize the young man. "Look, nobody needs to get hurt here. Just give me the bag and we all go our separate ways." "That's not happening," Michael said, though he could hear the uncertainty in his own voice. He wasn't a fighter. He was a middle-aged software engineer who drove for Uber and tried to keep his mortgage current. But Elena's obvious terror and the desperation in her voice when she talked about her son's surgery made backing down impossible. The standoff stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. The young man's eyes kept flicking toward the bag Elena was clutching, then back to Michael's face. I could practically see the internal debate. How badly did he need whatever was in that bag, and was he willing to go through Michael to get it? Then, unexpectedly, his shoulder sagged. "You don't understand," he said, and now I could hear genuine desperation in his voice. "I need that money. My little girl. She's going to end up in foster care if I don't come up with rent money by tomorrow morning." The words hit Michael like a physical blow. Another parent, another impossible choice between financial survival and family preservation. Michael looked at Elena, who had grown very still, the bag pressed against her chest. "How much do you need?" Elena asked quietly. "What?" The young man looked confused by the question. "How much do you need for rent?" $1,800, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. $1,800 and they won't evict us. My daughter gets to keep her home." Elena was silent for a long moment, her internal struggle visible on her face. Michael watched her glance toward the house where she had presumably been meeting someone, then back to the young man whose desperation mirrored her own. "What's your name?" she asked. "Derek Williams." "Derek, I'm Elena Rodriguez. This money, it's for my son's heart surgery. Without it, he could die." Derek's face crumpled. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what else to do. They're going to take Mia away from me." Michael found himself in the surreal position of mediating between two desperate parents, both facing impossible choices. Part of him wanted to step back and let them work it out between themselves, but another part recognized that this moment could define all three of their lives depending on what happened next. "There has to be another way," Michael said. "Derek, what about family, friends, social services?" "You think I haven't tried everything?" Derek's voice rose slightly. "My parents are dead. Mia's mom took off 2 years ago. I've been working construction, but the company went under last month. I've applied for every job, every assistance program. Nothing comes through fast enough." Elena was staring at Derek with an expression Michael couldn't quite read. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful rather than feared. "How old is Mia?" she asked. 6. She's just started first grade." Derek's voice broke. "She loves school. She's got friends. If they put her in foster care..." "You'd do anything for her." "Anything." Elena nodded slowly, as if confirming something to herself. "I understand that, completely." Michael sensed a shift in the dynamic, though he couldn't predict where it was leading. Elena seemed to be processing information, weighing options that weren't visible to him. Derek had lowered his hands, no longer reaching for the bag, but still watching Elena with desperate hope. "Elena," Michael said carefully, "whatever you're thinking—" "I'm thinking," Elena interrupted, "that maybe we're all looking at this wrong." She stood up, still clutching the bag, and took a step toward Derek. Michael tensed, ready to intervene if Derek made any sudden moves, but the young man remained still. "Derek, if I gave you the $1,800, what would happen to my son?" He'd die, wouldn't he?" "Probably. The surgery can't wait much longer." Derek looked stricken. "Then I can't take your money, even if it means losing Mia. I won't kill a kid to save my situation. I won't." Elena studied Derek's face in the harsh light from Michael's phone. Something in her expression suggested she was seeing something she hadn't expected, a line Derek wouldn't cross even in his desperation.
Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Elena set the bag down on the sidewalk between them, her movements deliberate and careful. In the harsh illumination from Michael's phone, her face looked different than it had in the car. Harder, more resolved, as if she were dropping a mask she'd been wearing. "The money," she began, her voice steady now, "didn't come from savings or borrowing from family. It came from St. Mary's Hospital." Michael felt his stomach drop. "Elena, what are you saying?" "I've been working there for 8 years. I know their systems, their security protocols, their banking procedures. I know when they transfer cash donations to the main vault, and I know the 15-minute window when those donations sit unguarded in the administrative office." Derek had gone very still, his eyes fixed on Elena's face. "You stole it." "I borrowed it," Elena corrected, though the distinction sounded hollow even to her. "I was going to put it back after Diego's surgery. The hospital has insurance for theft losses. They recover the money. Diego would live. Everyone would be fine." "Except you'd be a thief," Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena's laugh was bitter. "Do you know what the insurance company told me when I appealed their decision for the 3rd time? They said Diego's surgery was experimental and not medically necessary. Not necessary to save an 8-year-old's life." She opened the bag, revealing neat stacks of cash, $47,000, donation money from people who specifically gave it to help patients like Diego. The hospital was going to use it for administrative costs and building improvements. I decided Diego needed it more than they needed a coffee machine in the boardroom. Michael stared at the money, his mind reeling. The woman he'd driven across town, the desperate mother he'd sympathized with, was a thief. But she was also exactly what she'd claimed to be, a parent willing to do anything to save her child. "Elena," he said carefully, "taking this money won't solve anything. When they discover it's missing, they already have." Elena's voice was calm, resigned. "That call I made, it wasn't to confirm the surgery payment. It was to my lawyer. Hospital security reviewed the footage. They know it was me." The weight of her words settled over the three of them like a heavy blanket. Elena Rodriguez wasn't just a thief, she was a caught thief. The money in the bag was evidence in a criminal case that would destroy her life whether she returned it or not. "So why are you here?" Derek asked. "If they already caught you, why not just give up?" Elena looked toward the house where she had originally been headed. "Because giving up means Diego dies. And because I realized something tonight talking to Michael in the car, sometimes the people who look like criminals are just parents trying to save their children." She turned her attention back to Derek. "You were going to rob me for $1,800 to keep your daughter. I stole $47,000 to save my son. We're not so different." Michael felt like he was watching a car accident in slow motion, horrible and fascinating, an impossible stop. "Elena, you can't seriously be considering—" "I'm considering giving Derek what he needs for rent, taking what I need for Diego's surgery, and returning the rest to the hospital with a full confession." That's still theft, Michael pointed out. Yes, it is. But it's theft that saves 2 children instead of 1. I'm going to get arrested anyway. At least this way, Diego lives and Mia gets to stay with her father. Derek was shaking his head. I can't take stolen money. Even if it saves Mia, I can't make her life better by ruining yours. My life is already ruined, Elena said simply. The question is whether any good comes from it. Michael found himself in the impossible position of trying to talk 2 desperate parents out of making choices that would destroy their lives while potentially saving their children. Every argument he could think of seemed hollow in the face of their circumstances. There has to be another way, he said. Elena, what about crowdfunding, social media campaigns, hospital charity programs? I tried all of that. 3 months of trying while Diego's condition deteriorated. The most I raised was $4,000. Do you know how many children need expensive surgeries? How many parents are posting pictures of their sick kids, begging strangers for money? The internet is full of them. Most get nothing. Derek, what about... I've tried everything too, Derek interrupted. Every job, every program, every favor I could call in. Tomorrow morning, if I don't have $1,800, a social worker comes and takes me away. After that, even if I get back on my feet, the system won't give her back. She'll be in care for months, maybe years. Michael looked between them, seeing the same desperate calculation in both their eyes. The math of parenthood, where love multiplied by desperation equaled choices that normal people couldn't understand. What if, Michael heard himself say, there was a third option? Both Elena and Derek turned to look at him. Michael wasn't sure where the words were coming from, but something in the situation demanded a different kind of solution. Elena, you said the hospital already knows you took the money. Yes. And Derek, you said you need $1,800 by tomorrow morning. Yes. What if we returned all the money, but found another way to solve both problems? Elena's expression suggested he might have lost his mind. Michael, there is no other way. That's why we're standing on this street at midnight. Maybe there is. Michael was thinking out loud now, pieces of an impossible plan forming in his mind. Elena, you said what happens if you return the money voluntarily, before they arrest you. I still get charged with theft, probably get fired. Diego still needs surgery I can't afford. But the charges might be reduced if you cooperate. And if the money gets returned, maybe the hospital focuses more on making sure it doesn't happen again than on destroying you. Derek was following the conversation intently. What are you thinking? I'm thinking, Michael said slowly, that maybe we pool our resources and our problems. Elena has money she can't keep. Derek needs money he can't get. And I don't have money, but I have time, and I have a 16-year-old daughter who's taught me that sometimes the impossible becomes possible when people help each other. Michael, Elena said, that's not a plan. That's just hope. Maybe hope is where plans start. Michael pulled out his phone and opened the browser. Elena, what's your lawyer's name? Sarah Chen. Why? Different Sarah. Look, I'm going to make some calls. We're going to figure this out, but first we're going to get that money back to the hospital. And then what? Derek asked. Then we're going to save both your kids. Elena and Derek exchanged glances. 2 desperate parents trying to decide whether to trust a stranger who was promising the impossible. Michael wasn't sure he trusted himself. He had no idea how they were going to make this work. But he knew that walking away wasn't an option. Elena, you said you'd do anything for Diego. Yes. Derek, same question about Mia. Absolutely. Then we're going to do this together. All of us. We're going to return that money, we're going to keep Diego alive, and we're going to keep Mia with her father. How? Elena's voice carried a note of desperate hope. Michael looked at the money in the bag, then at the 2 parents who had been willing to destroy their lives for their children. I have no idea, he admitted. but I know we're going to figure it out.
Michael's first call was to his daughter Sarah, waking her at 1:15 a.m. with an explanation that made no sense and a request that made even less. "Dad, you want me to do what?" Sarah's voice carried the particular combination of concern and exasperation that teenagers reserved for parents who had clearly lost their minds. "I need you to research crowdfunding platforms, medical charity organizations, and emergency assistance programs. Everything you can find that might help with children's medical expenses and emergency financial aid." At 1 a.m? "Sarah, I'm helping some people who are in serious trouble. Their kids are in danger. I need you to be my research team." There was a pause while Sarah processed this. Despite her teenage attitude, she had inherited her father's instinct to help people in crisis. "Okay, but Dad, this sounds really dangerous. Are you safe?" "I'm safe, and what we're doing is the right thing." That's what you always say when you're about to do something that scares Mom would have hated. Michael felt a pang at the reference to his deceased wife, but Sarah was right. Jessica would have hated this situation, but she also would have understood why he couldn't walk away from two parents trying to save their children. "Just trust me, okay? And Sarah, if I'm not home by morning, call your Aunt Linda and tell her everything." "Dad, I love you. Start researching." Michael's second call was to Elena's lawyer, waking Sarah Chen, no relation to Michael, at her home. The conversation was brief and not particularly encouraging. "Ms. Rodriguez needs to turn herself in immediately. Every hour she delays makes things worse, and if she's distributed any of the money to accomplices—" "We're not accomplices. We're trying to help her return it." "Then bring her in, now, tonight." "What are the chances she avoids prison time if she cooperates fully?" "Honestly, minimal. The hospital is under pressure from their insurance company and the board of directors. They need to make an example." Michael ended the call feeling more discouraged than enlightened. Elena had been listening to his side of the conversation, and her expression confirmed his worst fears. "I'm going to prison," she said simply. "Diego's going to die, and Derek's going to lose Mia." This was a stupid idea. "No," Derek said firmly, "it wasn't. Michael's right. We have to try something different." They were still standing on the residential street, though they'd moved closer to Michael's car in case they needed to leave quickly. The bag of money sat on the hood of the Camry, a constant reminder of the choices that had brought them together. Michael's phone rang. Sarah calling back. "Dad, I found something. There's an organization called Emergency Medical Angels. They provide immediate funding for children's medical emergencies, but they have a 24-hour application process and they require extensive documentation." "What kind of documentation?" "Medical records, financial statements, proof of insurance denial, recommendation letters from doctors. And Dad, they only approve about 30% of applications." Michael put the phone on speaker so Elena and Derek could hear. "Sarah, what about emergency assistance for housing, preventing evictions?" "There are programs, but they all have waiting periods. The fastest I found was a Catholic charity that can sometimes provide emergency rent assistance, but their office doesn't open until 9 a.m. Derek's face fell. "The eviction happens at 8. "Sarah, keep looking. There has to be something." "Dad, I also researched the hospital Elena works at. St. Mary's has a patient assistance program that covers up to 100% of medical costs for families who need income requirements." Elena's bitter laugh filled the night air. "I applied for that program. They denied Diego because our household income is $40 over their cutoff line. $40. "What's the cutoff?" Oana named a figure that made Michael's chest tighten. It was almost exactly what he had been earning before losing his software job. "Sarah, what if Elena's household income changed? What if she was suddenly unemployed?" "Dad, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking maybe Elena needs to get fired before she gets arrested." Elena stared at Michael as if he had announced his intention to run for president. "That makes no sense. If I'm unemployed, I have no income to support Diego at all. But if you're unemployed and Diego qualifies for the assistance program, the hospital pays for his surgery. And I still go to prison for theft. Maybe, but Diego lives." Derek was following the conversation with growing interest. "What about me? Even if Elena solves her problem, I still need $1,800 by morning." Michael looked at the bag of money, then at Derek, then at Elena.
An idea was forming. Not a good idea necessarily, but an idea that might actually work. Derek, what if you had a job starting Monday morning? Good pay, steady hours, enough to keep Mia and get back on your feet. I'd take it in a heartbeat, but I've been looking for 3 months. What if the job came with a signing bonus, enough to cover your rent emergency? Derek's eyes narrowed. Michael, what kind of job are you talking about? My job. The words hung in the air like a challenge to gravity. Elena and Derek stared at Michael as if he had announced his intention to run for president. Your Uber job? Elena asked. Not just Uber. I work part-time at an electronics warehouse, and I do freelance software consulting. What if Derek took over the warehouse job and the Uber driving while I focused on building up the consulting business? What if Elena's signing bonus for Derek came from the money we're about to return to the hospital? Michael, that's still theft. Elena pointed out. No, it's not. We're not keeping the hospital's money. We're returning it all. But we're documenting that some of it went to prevent a family from being destroyed. We make Derek's payment look like emergency charity assistance. Sarah's voice came through the phone speaker. Dad, are you basically trying to turn a theft into a charitable donation? Something like that. That's actually kind of brilliant, but also completely illegal.
Sarah, keep researching options. We need backup plans. Derek was shaking his head. I can't take your jobs, Michael. Even if this crazy scheme worked, you'd be destroying your own life to save mine. My life is already destroyed, Michael said, echoing Elena's earlier words. I'm 3 months behind on my mortgage. My daughter is watching me fail every single day. I lost a career I spent 20 years building because some corporate spreadsheet decided I was expendable. If I can use what's left of my situation to help someone else, then maybe it means something. The three of them stood in silence, processing the magnitude of what Michael was proposing. It wasn't just about returning money or finding jobs or saving children. It was about three strangers deciding to trust each other in a moment when trust seemed impossible. There's something else you should know, Elena said quietly. Something I haven't told you. Michael felt a familiar chill. What? The money in this bag, it's not just $47,000. Elena opened the bag wider, revealing a second compartment beneath the visible cash. There's actually $63,000 here. Derek's eyes widened. You said 47. I lied, because I needed to see if you were really willing to take only what you needed, or if you'd take everything. Elena looked at Derek with something approaching respect. You passed the test. Michael felt his carefully constructed plan crumbling. Elena, that changes everything. The hospital is going to know exactly how much is missing. Which is why, Elena continued, we need to be completely honest when we return it, all of it, including an explanation of how close I came to keeping it and why I changed my mind. Because of us? Derek asked. Because of you, both of you. You made me realize that doing the wrong thing for the right reasons is still doing the wrong thing. But doing the right thing doesn't mean giving up, it means finding a better way. Michael's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. He read it aloud. Dad, I found something. Emergency Medical Angels has a fast-track application for cases where the child's life is in immediate danger. If Elena can get a doctor to certify that Diego needs surgery within 48 hours, they can approve funding in as little as 6 hours. Diego's cardiologist has been saying for 2 weeks that we're running out of time, Elena said, pulling out her own phone. I can call him right now. It's almost 2 in the morning, Michael pointed out. He gave me his personal number for emergencies. This qualifies. While Elena stepped away to make the call, Michael turned his attention to Derek. The job offer is real. If you're willing to work, I can help you get started. Why would you do this for a stranger, especially a stranger who is about to rob someone? Michael thought about Sarah, about the nights he'd spent calculating impossible numbers, about the desperate feeling of watching everything slip away despite working as hard as he could. Because I know what it's like to feel like the system has failed you, and because maybe helping you means the system doesn't win this time. Derek's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I don't know what to say. Say you'll show up Monday morning ready to work. Say you'll be the father Mia needs you to be. I can do that. Elena returned, her face transformed by the first genuine hope Michael had seen all night. Dr. Patterson is meeting us at the hospital in 45 minutes. He said if he certifies Diego's case as critical, Emergency Medical Angels will prioritize the application. He's also going to recommend Diego for the hospital's assistance program with updated financial information. What changed? Michael asked. I told him the truth, all of it. The theft, the plan to use the money, meeting you two, deciding to return it. He said he's been fighting with the hospital administration about Diego's case for weeks, and this might be exactly the leverage he needs to force them to act. Elena, Derek said carefully, what happens to you when the doctor tells the hospital administration you stole the money? I get arrested. I probably go to prison, but at least Diego will be alive to remember me. The weight of her acceptance was crushing. I wanted to argue to find some loophole or legal exception, but the reality was stark. Elena had stolen $63,000 from her employer. Even returning it wouldn't erase that fact. Then we make sure the consequences are as minimal as possible. We go to the hospital together. We return the money in front of witnesses. We explain everything that happened tonight, including Derek's situation and how close this came to being something worse. You want to tell them about me trying to rob Elena? Derek looked alarmed. I want to tell them about 3 parents who made desperate choices and then chose something better. I want to tell them that the money came back because people helped each other instead of hurting each other. Sarah texted again. Dad, I also found something about Derek's eviction. If he can prove he has employment starting within 7 days, the court has to grant a 30-day extension. It's an Arizona law for families with minor children. Michael showed the text to Derek. Did you know about this? No. The eviction notice said I had to pay by tomorrow or they'd execute the order immediately. They lied. Or they didn't tell you about your rights. Michael felt a surge of anger at a system that preys on people's ignorance of their own protections. We can fight this. How? I don't have a lawyer. We'll find one, or we'll figure it out ourselves. Michael looked at his watch. But first, we're going to St. Mary's Hospital.
St. Mary's Hospital looked different at 2:30 a.m. than it had when Michael had picked up Elena just hours earlier. The emergency room entrance glowed with harsh fluorescent light, and the parking lot held a scattered collection of vehicles belonging to overnight staff and worried family members. Dr. Richard Patterson met them at the staff entrance, a tall man in his early 50s with gray hair and the kind of calm authority that came from years of delivering both good news and devastating diagnoses. He looked at the 3 of them, Elena, Michael, and Derek, with open curiosity. Elena, he said quietly, you're sure about this? I'm sure. Once we involve hospital security and administration, there's no taking it back. I know. Dr. Patterson nodded and held the door open. Then let's do this right. They walked through the hospital's back corridors, passing break rooms where exhausted residents grabbed power naps and supply closets that held the mundane tools of saving lives. Elena led them to the administrative wing, where offices sat dark and empty in the early morning hours. The money goes in there, Elena said, pointing to a door marked Financial Services Director. There's a deposit safe. I'll put it back exactly where I took it from. Elena, Dr. Patterson said gently, I need to call security first, and probably the hospital administrator. I understand. While they waited for hospital officials to arrive, Dr. Patterson pulled Elena aside to discuss Diego's medical status. Michael and Derek stood in the hallway, 2 strangers who had become unlikely allies in the span of a few hours. You really think this is going to work? Derek asked quietly. I think we're going to make it work, one way or another. Michael, you don't even know me. Why are you risking so much to help? Michael thought about his answer carefully. 3 years ago, my wife died. Car accident. Sarah was 13. I was working 80-hour weeks trying to climb the corporate ladder, trying to provide for my family by being absent from my family. I'm sorry. After Jessica died, I realized I'd been chasing the wrong things. Money, status, success. None of it mattered compared to being present for the people who needed me. Then I lost my job anyway, and I learned that the system I'd sacrificed for didn't care about me at all. So you're helping us because I want to believe that people matter more than systems, that 3 parents trying to save their kids matters more than corporate policies and insurance requirements and eviction procedures. Derek was quiet for a moment. My daughter asks me why we can't have nice things like her friends, why we have to move so much, why her mom left. I tell her that sometimes life is hard, but we have each other. That's the truth. But what if having each other isn't enough? What if love doesn't pay the rent or keep food on the table? Then we find people who believe that love should be enough, and we help each other make it work. Hospital security arrived first, 2 guards who looked simultaneously bored and alert, the peculiar state of people who spent their nights dealing with minor crises that occasionally escalated into major ones. They were followed 10 minutes later by a woman in her 60s wearing a business suit despite the ungodly hour. "I'm Margaret Holbrook, hospital administrator," she said, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone used to being in charge. "Dr. Patterson says we have a theft situation?" Alana stepped forward holding the bag. "Yes, ma'am. I stole $63,000 from the donation fund yesterday afternoon. I'm here to return it and turn myself in." If Margaret Holbrook was surprised by the direct confession, she didn't show it. "And these other 2 individuals?" "They helped me realize I needed to bring it back." "I see. Security, please escort Ms. Rodriguez to a private office. I'll need to call the police and our legal department." "Wait," Dr. Patterson said. "Margaret, there are circumstances here that you need to understand before involving the police. Richard, she just confessed to stealing $63,000 from the hospital. What circumstances could possibly matter?" "The circumstances that led a dedicated nurse with 8 years of exemplary service to make this choice, and the circumstances that led her to return every penny." What followed was one of the most surreal conversations Michael had ever witnessed. Dr. Patterson laid out Diego's medical situation, the insurance denials, Elena's attempts to navigate the system legally, and her growing desperation as her son's condition deteriorated. Margaret Holbrook listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When Dr. Patterson finished, she turned to Elena. "Is this accurate?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you believed stealing from the hospital was your only option?" "At the time, yes. Now I know I was wrong." "Because these 2 men convinced you?" "Because they showed me that impossible situations sometimes have solutions we haven't thought of yet, and because they reminded me that doing wrong things for right reasons is still doing wrong things." Margaret Holbrook was silent for a long moment. Then she did something none of them expected. She sat down in one of the hallway chairs and removed her reading glasses. 23 years ago, my daughter needed a bone marrow transplant. The insurance company denied coverage, calling it experimental. I was working as a hospital billing administrator at the time. I had access to accounts. I had the knowledge to move money around. Everyone stared at her. "I came within hours of doing exactly what you did, Elena. The only thing that stopped me was a donor match coming through at the last possible moment." She looked up, her eyes bright. "My daughter is alive today because of luck, not because the system worked." "Margaret," Dr. Patterson started, "I'm not condoning theft, Richard, but I'm also not going to pretend I don't understand the calculation Elena made. The system is broken. We all know it. We see it every day in this hospital." She stood up and addressed Elena directly. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to return that money to the safe right now in front of witnesses. Then you and I are going to have a conversation about Diego's case with our patient advocacy department. If his surgery qualifies for emergency assistance, and Dr. Patterson tells me it does, then we're going to approve it. I'm still going to be arrested. Maybe, maybe not. You returned the money voluntarily before we even knew it was missing from the safe. The security footage shows you taking it, but it also shows you bringing it back. The police will be informed that we had an internal security incident that was resolved. Whether they pursued charges is up to them and the district attorney, but the hospital won't be pressing for maximum prosecution." Elena looked like she might collapse from relief and disbelief. "Why would you do this?" "Because I remember what it feels like to be a mother who would do anything to save her child.
and because Diego deserves a chance at life more than we deserve revenge for a theft that was prevented.
Dr. Patterson was smiling. Margaret, I've worked with you for 15 years and I've never heard you admit to almost committing a crime. There are a lot of things I've never admitted, Richard. This seems like an appropriate time to start. She turned her attention to Michael and Derek. Now, someone tell me why you two are involved in this situation. Michael explained Derek's circumstances, the attempted robbery that became a conversation, and the decision to help each other find better solutions than desperate crimes. Margaret listened with the same unreadable expression she'd maintained throughout Elena's story. When Michael finished, Margaret pulled out her phone and made a call. Janet, it's Margaret Holbrook. I know it's early, but I need you to come to the hospital. We have an urgent employment situation. Yes, right now. She ended the call and looked at Derek. Our HR director will be here in 20 minutes. St. Mary's has a policy of hiring people who need second chances. We'll find something for you. Probably facilities or transport services. The pay isn't great, but it's steady and it comes with benefits. Derek looked stunned. I don't understand. Why would you hire me after what I tried to do tonight? Because you tried and then you stopped. Because you chose to help return stolen money instead of taking it. Because your daughter deserves a father who's employed. Margaret's voice softened. And because 30 years in healthcare administration has taught me that people in impossible situations sometimes do desperate things. What matters is what they do when given an alternative. Elena was openly crying now. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet. You're not out of the situation, and we still have to deal with the legal implications. But Diego is going to get his surgery, and you're going to have the chance to be there when he wakes up. Dr. Patterson cleared his throat. Margaret, about the patient assistance program. Already ahead of you, Richard. I'll personally override the income requirement. Effective immediately, Elena is on unpaid administrative leave pending investigation of this incident. Her household income is now 0, which means Diego automatically qualifies. The elegant bureaucratic solution was almost beautiful in its simplicity. By placing Elena on leave instead of firing her, Margaret had simultaneously addressed the theft investigation and made Diego eligible for the assistance that had been denied. There is one more thing, Michael said. The application to emergency medical angels. Even with hospital assistance, they might need additional funding for post-surgical care and medications. Margaret nodded. Richard, make sure your recommendation letter emphasizes the urgency and includes documentation of our assistance approval. That should strengthen their application significantly. Over the next hour, they completed the bureaucratic rituals that transformed a crisis into an orderly resolution. Elena returned the money to the safe, signing documents that acknowledged the theft and the return. Derek met with the HR director and filled out employment paperwork. Michael called Sarah to let her know everyone was safe. As dawn began to lighten the sky outside the hospital windows, the three unlikely allies found themselves sitting in the cafeteria over terrible coffee and surprisingly good breakfast burritos. I can't believe that just happened, Derek said, still looking shell-shocked. I was going to rob someone tonight, and instead I have a job starting Monday. You have a job and a 30-day extension on your eviction, Michael corrected, having helped Derek file the proper paperwork with the court system online. Your landlord is going to be very unhappy, but the law is on your side now. Elena was staring at her phone, where texts from Dr. Patterson were providing updates on the Emergency Medical Angels application. They're reviewing Diego's case. Dr. Patterson thinks we'll hear back by this afternoon. What happens if they say no? Then we figure out Plan C. We didn't come this far to give up now. Plan C? There's always a Plan C. Sometimes it's a bake sale. Sometimes it's calling every local news station and telling them Diego's story. Sometimes it's showing up at the insurance company headquarters and refusing to leave until they review the case properly. Elena was staring weakly. You really believe there's always another option? I believe that when people help each other, impossible things become possible. Tonight proved that. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Three people who had been strangers hours ago and were now bound together by shared crisis in mutual rescue. Michael, Elena said quietly, you're losing your house. We solved my problem and Derek's problem, but you're still 3 months behind on your mortgage. 4 months after this month's payment doesn't happen. So what's your plan C?
Michael had been avoiding thinking about his own situation while focusing on theirs, but the question forced him to confront reality. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe I sell the house. Maybe Sarah and I move to a cheaper city. Maybe I finally accept that the life I had is gone and start building something different. Or maybe, Derek said carefully, we help you the way we helped us. Derek, you're starting an entry-level job. You can't. Not financially, but my cousin runs a small real estate investment company. They buy houses that are in pre-foreclosure, work out deals with the banks, let the family stay as renters with option to buy back. It's not ideal, but it beats losing everything. Michael felt a flicker of hope. You really think he'd consider my situation? I think he'd listen if I called him, and I think between the three of us, we might be able to figure out an arrangement that works. Elena was nodding. And once Diego's surgery is done and I know what my legal situation looks like, I can help too. I might not be able to work as a nurse anymore, but I can work somewhere. We pool resources, we support each other, we make it work. You're talking about becoming some kind of weird mutual aid society? I'm talking about being the community the system tells us doesn't exist anymore. I'm talking about proving that people helping people is more powerful than institutions protecting institutions. Michael looked at these two strangers who had become allies, then friends, then something like family in the space of a single night. You're both completely crazy, says the man who convinced a thief and a would-be robber to return stolen money and solve their problems legally. Fair point. Michael's phone rang. Sarah, calling with an update on her research. He answered on the speaker so Elena and Derek could hear. Dad, I found 6 more organizations that might help with Diego's medical expenses. I made a spreadsheet with application requirements and deadlines. I'm emailing it to you now. Sarah, have you slept at all?
Sleep is for people who aren't helping save a kid's life. I also found a tenant rights organization that can help Derek write his eviction. And I maybe accidentally called that real estate investment company Derek's cousin works for. Sarah? They're open to discussing options. The guy I talked to said they specialize in helping families avoid foreclosure. He wants to schedule a consultation. Michael felt his throat tightened with emotion. His 16-year-old daughter had spent the night researching solutions for complete strangers because it was the right thing to do. Thank you, sweetheart. You're amazing. I'm tired, and I'm probably going to sleep through first period tomorrow. But, yeah, I'm pretty amazing. Sarah's voice softened. Dad, are you really okay? This whole thing sounded really scary. I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. I met some good people tonight. Bring them home for breakfast. I want to meet the people my dad turned into a crime-fighting social worker. After Michael ended the call, Elena looked at him with something approaching awe. Your daughter is incredible. She is, and she learned it by watching her mother, not me. She learned it by watching both of you. You don't become that kind of person by accident. Dr. Patterson appeared in the cafeteria entrance, his expression a careful mix of professional and personal. Elena, can I speak with you for a moment? Elena stood quickly, fear and hope warring on her face. Michael and Derek followed at a respectful distance as Dr. Patterson led Elena to a quieter corner of the cafeteria. Emergency Medical Angels approved Diego's application, full funding for the surgery, and 6 months of follow-up care. Elena's knees buckled. Derek and Michael caught her, supporting her weight as she processed the news that meant her son would live. When? She managed to ask. We're scheduling the surgery for Friday morning. That gives us 2 days to complete pre-op testing and get Diego strong enough for the procedure. And the hospital assistance program? Approved. Between Emergency Medical Angels and our assistance program, Diego's care is fully covered. Elena was crying too hard to speak. Dr. Patterson waited patiently while Michael and Derek stood witness to a mother's relief at her child's salvation. When she could finally speak, her first words were, "What about the theft investigation?" Margaret talked to the hospital's legal counsel. Since you returned all the money voluntarily and no actual loss occurred, they're recommending we handle it as an internal personnel matter rather than pursuing criminal charges. You'll face disciplinary action, possibly suspension without pay, but probably not termination. I can live with that.
There's one condition, though. The board wants you to work with our patient advocacy department to reform how we handle cases like Diego's. They want to make sure no other parent feels like theft is their only option. Elena wiped her tears and straightened her shoulders. I can do that. I want to do that. I know you do. That's why I suggested it to Margaret. As the morning shift began arriving at the hospital and the building transitioned from night quiet to day bustle, Michael, Elena, and Derek found themselves standing in the parking lot where this strange journey had begun. What happens now? Derek asked. Now we go home and sleep. Then we wake up and start dealing with our real lives, which are still complicated and difficult, but maybe slightly more manageable than they were yesterday. And then we help each other. Derek starts his new job Monday. You focus on Diego's surgery Friday. I meet with Derek's cousin's real estate company next week. We figure it out one day at a time. Together, Derek added. Together, Elena agreed. They exchanged phone numbers and made plans to check in with each other throughout the week. As they prepared to go their separate ways, Michael realized that something fundamental had shifted in his understanding of how the world worked. He'd spent 2 years feeling like he was drowning alone, fighting against systems designed to crush people who fell through the cracks. Tonight, he learned that the alternative to drowning alone wasn't just survival. It was finding other people who were also struggling and choosing to keep each other afloat. It wasn't a perfect solution. Their problems weren't magically solved, but they had something they hadn't had before: hope, community, and the knowledge that impossible situations sometimes yielded to the simple power of people helping people. Michael climbed into his Camry as the sun began to properly rise, painting the Phoenix sky in shades of orange and pink. His daughter was waiting at home, probably having crashed on the couch surrounded by research notes and empty coffee cups. His mortgage was still dangerously overdue. His career was still in shambles. But Diego Rodriguez was going to get his heart surgery. Mia Williams was going to stay with her father. And 3 strangers had become a family of choice, bound together by crisis and mutual rescue. As Michael drove home through the early morning traffic, he realized he was smiling. Not because his problems were solved, but because he'd remembered something essential that he'd forgotten during 2 years of struggling alone. The most powerful force in the world wasn't money or systems or policy. It was people who chose to care about each other's children as much as their own.
Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss these. Just click to watch and don't forget to subscribe.